And joining us via Skype is Naeem Jeenah, the Executive Director of the Afro-Middle East Center. Very good evening to you, Naeem. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, Amnesty International says security forces from the state of Palestine unleashed violence on peaceful protesters in the Gaza Strip and is now accusing the state of Palestine of human rights violations. Now, will this not perhaps threaten the cause in their eyes of the international community when it comes to Israeli-Palestine relations?
Well, the fact is that these kinds of violations by the Palestinian Authority are not new. We are seeing it now, and it's making big news because the person arrested is from Amnesty International. But activists in the West Bank have been facing this kind of repression for years, literally. It seems that the Palestinian Authority has actually learned lessons from the Israelis. And I don't know that we can say that this will threaten anything, because the Palestinian Authority and the Israelis have, for the past couple of decades, have had security coordination in the West Bank, with PA security forces assisting the Israelis, even when there are no negotiations taking place, when publicly the rhetoric between the PA and Israel is strong and harsh. The security coordination has been going on. So effectively, what the PA has been doing, for example, with this protest that was suppressed and the arrest of the Amnesty International person, is playing the role of an outsourced security consultant for Israel.
Naeem, can we perhaps attribute part of the crisis in the Strip to the split in leadership within the Palestinian Authority between Hamas and Fatah?
Well, yes, of course, in the Gaza Strip, that is the case. When Hamas was elected, of course, in 2006 to be the new government, is not really the correct term for the Palestinian Authority, but to be the new authority. Soon after that, one of the Fatah people in Gaza, security people, Mohammed Dahlan was planning to take over the Gaza Strip. And Hamas responded by getting rid of Dahlan's people there and took over the Gaza Strip, and that was the beginning of the split of the occupied Palestinian territory between the West Bank and Gaza, with Gaza being controlled by Hamas and the West Bank being controlled by the Fatah-led PA. So certainly that with that kind of genesis, Gaza is a very important factor in this split.
Let's go back to the advent of this crisis, shall we? I mean, what could the Palestinian Authority be trying to accomplish by cutting government workers' salaries and then refusing to pay the Strip's electricity bill?
Well, let me first say that if we want to go to the origins of the problem, the origins of the problem are not the Palestinian Authority. The origins of the problem are Israel and Israel's policies with regards to Palestinians generally, and in this case particularly with regards to Gaza. The siege on Gaza was implemented in 2007 by Israel. Israel is the one that prevents food from going in, that prevents medication from going in, medical supplies from going in, reconstruction material from going in after 3 onslaughts that it launched on the Gaza Strip in the past 12 years. So primarily the culprit, of course, is Israel. What the Palestinian Authority is doing is, in a sense, trying to curry favor with Israel through these kinds of measures. And these measures really, should be regarded as crimes against humanity, cutting off or refusing to pay, and therefore being responsible for cutting off the electricity and other supplies, food and other supplies to 2.5 million people is a huge crime. What it seeks to accomplish by cutting off the salaries, for example, of government workers in Gaza, and many of those government workers, by the way, a large number of them, are not Hamas members, they're Fatah members. So the attempt by the Fatah-led PA in Ramallah is to create such a level of discontent in Gaza that you would have people rising up against Hamas in Gaza. In that it then is really in league with the Israelis in terms of their intentions for Gaza. In fact, just a month or so ago, there was a suggestion by Israel that perhaps they should consider easing the siege on Gaza somewhat. And one of the security officials from the Palestinian Authority said that should not be a consideration, and that shouldn't happen. So the PA in Ramallah has become complicit in Israeli siege of Gaza, simply for political reasons, because Gaza is controlled by a rival political party.
And taking that into cognizance, I suppose then that there is actually more than we know about the advent of these protests. And there's been over 10 weekly protests in the Gaza Strip in as many weeks. Are these protests yielding the desired outcomes?
Well, that depends on what we regard as the desired outcome. I mean, certainly in terms of the stated objective by the protesters, and the protesters in Gaza is a broad range of people, of course, many of them from different political groups, whether it's Fatah, Hamas, the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Islamic Jihad, etc. But a large number of them are people who don't belong to any political groups and are just fed up with their miserable lives. The stated objective from when the protests began was that people said, you know, they of the 2.5 million people in the Gaza Strip, about 1.5 million of them are refugees. And so they were saying that they wanted to return to their homes, which homes are in Israel. So in terms of that objective, of course, they haven't achieved that. They've not really crossed over into Israel and gotten to their homes. But what it has done, I think, is expose the brutality of the Israelis. Remember that we've got close to 100 Palestinian unarmed protesters being killed in these weeks by the Israelis, close to 3,000 injured, many of them maimed for life, many of them crippled by Israeli sniper bullets, and not a single Israeli soldier or Israeli killed or injured. So clearly it's a very one-sided affair, and it has exposed the brutality of the Israelis and the impunity rather, by which they are able to act and be protected, particularly by the United States. So in terms of raising the issue of the Palestinian cause and showing the rest of the world how desperate and miserable Palestinian lives are in Gaza, I think from that perspective they have achieved something, but not in terms of the bigger perspective, which the bigger objective, which is that Palestinian refugees want to exercise their right under international law, which is to be able to return to their homes.
Now, the State of Palestine is a treaty to the main international human rights treaties, or rather is a party to those treaties. So therefore, the authorities have the moral obligation under international law to uphold human rights. And that said, the State of Palestine is now opening itself to coercive action.
Yeah, you're talking about the protests in the West Bank.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes. No, certainly. And as I said early on, this kind of coercive action, I would say repression and suppression of free expression is not entirely new for the Palestinian Authority. The PA has pledged itself, and Mahmoud Abbas, the president of the PA, has said previously that they regard what they call security coordination with Israel as being, in Abbas's words, sacred. And so for the past couple of decades, they have played the role of the kind of outsourced consultant of Israeli security in the West Bank, assisting Israeli security forces, and in many cases doing the job themselves. So this kind of coercive policy that we saw a couple of days ago is not new, and I think that what it has resulted in is large-scale dissatisfaction among Palestinians generally across the political groups and political divides with the Palestinian Authority, and a desire and need among Palestinians to see a new situation, a situation beyond the Palestinian Authority.
All right, Naeem, thank you so much for your time. That is Naeem Jeenah, the Executive Director of the Afro-Middle East Center.